Now what I do with every one of those studies, if they're in the Gospels, I have a column on each one of them. That's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now some of the signs that Jesus did, they're not in all four Gospels. Now I have one on every one of them. And if anybody would like one, all they have to do is say, I'd like to have one of those. It would be easier. You got an email for everybody, don't you? So it'd be easier. When we go to conferences like with the IMB, they don't really hand out a lot of paper anymore. They just give out an email, and you can go and download it if you want to. And then you have it that way without them having to print out a lot of paper. And so, but each one of those columns are the story of the feeding of the 5,000. There's a little difference in each one of them. Now, something that Merle said this morning to me kind of confirmed something that I had been, because I pray about what I'm doing and how I'm doing and everything. I pray about it for weeks on end. I go to your meetings, like the business meeting. I don't vote. All I do is listen, because the problem, I say that's not a problem. The problem is I don't know the history of the church, and I really don't know how people think or what you're thinking, but I can pick it up. And one of the things that we had to do in Brazil is we had to do what's called qualitative interviews. Now, we know what a survey is. Like they say, how many people like blue, like green, like yellow, and then you compile that. Well, a qualitative interview is different. You don't take a lot of them, but we would take 20. We had to take 20 qualitative interviews with each people group that we worked with. And we'd go in with, we'd choose certain neighborhood, and we would go in and just listen to people. It's just listening. You don't have any comments. You just listen to what people say. And then we'd come back and we would write all that up, and we would try to figure out how people think and how they make decisions. And we would do that. Now, what happened is that caused me to adjust how we present the gospel, because everybody makes a decision a little bit different. Now, it's no secret to that, and I'm not interested in coercing anybody to make any kind of decision. That's not my job here. So I'm not interested in that. Whatever you want to do. My son worked for Deloitte and Touche for a long time, and he would go to different companies. Deloitte and Touche would send him out. And for example, he went to Coca-Cola, and they would analyze Coca-Cola, and all he would do is ask questions. And then they'd come back and they would pay them, Deloitte and Touche, the big accounting company, and they would give ideas. Now, you can do the same thing with the church. Brentwood calls in a counseling company, consultant company from time to time, and they would pay between, I don't know, what was it, somewhere between $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a pop.
Yeah, you got a little bit more every year.
To come in and just look and ask questions. Now, for a smaller church, you can do the same thing, and there are consultant companies, and they only charge $700 a day to come in. To look around. We had a fellow that worked at Brentwood in church planting, and he would go into a church, and I'd say, well, what did you do? How much did it cost? It would cost $700 a day. That's what we charge to go in and analyze the church and just tell them, this is what we see. Now, it's up to them to do anything they want to do. They don't, because sometimes you need a different set of eyes to look at something. You've probably have gone into your house and you're used to looking and seeing things all the time. Somebody else comes in and they start looking at your house. You say, well, I didn't see that dirt behind that door. Or, I didn't see that. I didn't notice that. all of a sudden, just looking with a different set of eyes gives you a different perspective of looking at something. Now, one of the prayers that I always pray, I pray on every day for the longest, not necessarily word for word, but the psalmist said, Lord, examine my heart and test my spirit and see if there be any wicked way in me. Just examine me over and over and over again. You read through the Proverbs and you read through the Psalms, it says constantly to examine me, because we all have what's called a blind spot. And I was riding to school one day with my grandkids, and we were talking about a blind spot. And he said, well, what is a blind spot? I said, well, there's one spot in your eye where the optic nerve goes into your brain, and you can't see anything there. And he said, well, what's the problem with a blind spot? I said, well, it's a blind spot. Now, everybody has blind spots except me. I don't have a blind spot. and I play with him a little bit like that. And he said, oh, I bet you do. I said, well, when you know everything, you don't have any blind spots. So I just constantly picking at him. But it does take a while to get over a blind spot. Now, I got one other thing to give you. Now, this is a little bit different. Judy, a couple of weeks ago, she asked me a question. Now, these are just little thin pieces of paper here. Every once in a while, one of them has something written on the back side. Yeah, I accidentally printed on my printer. I printed on both sides, so it printed on both sides. And so, if you got something printed on the other side, forget it. But what? Let me see it. I'll give it back. What it has, I could do it talking about the second coming and what's going on in Israel and these other places around the world right now. But this is Dr. John Barnett, and I've mentioned his name before. He has a history degree. He got a history degree from Michigan State when he was about, best I can figure, about 20. About 20. No. And then he went to Bob Jones, and he taught history and became dean of the seminary. And then he went to MacArthur's College out in California, became a history professor there. And then he went to Dallas Seminary and got a doctor's degree in the book of Revelation. There's no way that I can do what he's done. He's just way above and beyond me in all different kinds of ways. But the other day, was it Monday, I was listening to a sermon that he had on Psalm 83. Now, you probably don't know Psalm 83 off the top of your head right now, but Psalm 83 deals with exactly what's going on in Israel right now. And this is the reason you may have heard people on the news saying that we've already started World War III. Maybe you've heard them talk about like that, started World War III. Now, several politicians, leaders, and religious leaders, him included, thinks that we may be, it's about a 90% chance that we're already started Psalm 83. 83 is a coalition of all the nations around Israel, North Africa, Middle East, and up along the coast, who have formed a coalition to go against Israel. And now the biggest thing about if you happen to type in this, the coming prophesied invasion of Israel, EBI 11, if you type that in on your computer or your phone, this message will pop up. It's a 40-minute message, 45-minute message. And then there'll be a map that pops up. It doesn't stay very long. But then he also will say that you can go, and I can't figure out why he mentions these two people, Joel Osteen and Tim LaHaye. I think he did that more sarcastically. But what he did, what he has done in history, he traces, there's 70 nations that left the Noah's Ark when it landed in Babylon, and these nations can be traced as to where they went all over the world. They can be traced. Now, that may be more history than you're interested in, but every one of those nations has been documented over the years as to where they are. So when you read all of these nations that are mentioned in Psalm 83, there's a lot of them. A lot of nations, just one right after another, mentioned about where they went after the flood. Now, you can buy a book. I chose not to. Not that that's just not my strength to do Revelation. My strength, as I've mentioned many times, my gift is evangelism, equipping people in evangelism, not necessarily teaching the book of Revelation. And so when somebody can do this 1,000 times better than me, I'm not going to get into competition with them. Now, I listened to his study on Revelation a couple of years ago. He went through every chapter in the book of Revelation. And he did, what's that? Oh, I didn't know if I heard. Oh, okay, no, if I didn't. Sometimes I get confused on what I'm about to say. But anyway, he went through the entire book of Revelation. Now, just like you probably, I've heard a lot of studies on Revelation. And sometimes they get out of balance. Sometimes it's all about the newspaper. You know, we read something about the newspaper, and so we say that that's exactly what the New Testament is talking about. Other times, it's if you really want to know what the book of Revelation is all about, you need to send me $50 and you'll really understand the book of Revelation. And then it is too sensational and not practical enough. Well, in my observation, he is about as practical and teaching as anybody I've ever seen. Now, he's very practical. He'll talk a little bit about it, and then he'll say, if you're not living this way, you don't really understand what I'm saying. And so he's got the practicality and the teaching together. Now, the thing that I can do is in the 7 churches of Revelation, because that's right now. That's where we live. And that is very prophetic, meaning it's the 7 churches of Revelation are very in your face. Jesus is very pointed in your face in the 7th book of Revelation. Basically, he said, if you want to know what the problem you've got in your church, read the first 3 books of the book of Revelation. The 7 churches of Revelation will explain every problem you've got in your church and why you got them and what you need to do to correct them. And then whenever you read the 7 churches of Revelation, and then when you go to Turkey and you see Ephesus, Jesus said in Ephesus had a church of 50,000 members. And then Jesus said, if you don't correct these things in what I'm telling you about Ephesus, I'm going to take my candlestick away and you're not going to be anymore. Well, when you go to Turkey and you see what happened to Ephesus, it's as white clean as this floor. Nothing there. Because they didn't listen to what Jesus told them to do. And he took his candlestick away and they ceased to exist. So most churches in revitalization, they will suggest a study on the book of Revelation in the 7 churches. Because he explains very clearly what will happen if you don't listen to me. And so he never leaves us in any doubt. Never leaves us in any doubt. The other thing that he says, Barnett, if you happen to go to his book of Revelation, and this study right here is not on the book of Revelation in the 7 churches of Asia, but it's on what's going on right now with the war going on right now. He says, I walk around your church. He said, I'm walking in the midst of the church. And Barnett said when he taught history and taught in seminary, he would walk up and down the aisles in the classroom. I don't know if you've ever had a teacher that walked up and down the aisles while the teacher was teaching, but he said Jesus walked up and down the aisle in the church. And he said, I know you. And so there's no fooling around. Now, jumping back to this study here, you will find in this study, if you happen to listen to it, one of the really critical things that's always been a puzzle to me about the study in the book of Revelation. Now, this study, Israel wins. He defeats them. You know about the 1948, the war, the first war, they won that. The 74 war, they won that one. The 56 war, is that right, Don?
The war 12.
Yeah, they won every one of the wars. So my thinking is, why do they need a big peace agreement if they just keep winning all these wars, wiping everybody out? Well, regardless of what you think about Trump one way or another, he formed the Abraham covenant, made peace there. Well, that can't happen. My own personal opinion, that's the reason. It was the first president that we had not had a war in the 4 years that he was president. And so that was one reason why we had to get a war going, because war's got to keep going. You got to keep making money with the military equipment. And the United States is the largest supplier of military equipment in the world. It all has been. And so you can't have peace. You got to have war going. You got to keep that war going to keep making money with military equipment. Now that is a danger of me saying something like that because, but at any rate, so what happened then during that Abraham Accord is that they made an agreement that they would build a temple, a mosque, there already is a mosque there, and a church in and around the Temple Mount. Now, that is what the man of peace is going to do when that man of peace comes into control. Now, Jesus is not going to come for at least 7 years from today, because he's going to come at the end of the tribulation. Now, that hadn't started. This war is not the beginning of the tribulation. It's just the beginning, possibly, of World War III. Now, how far it goes, nobody really knows. And I don't know. But he does explain this clearer than anybody I've said. You know, when I'm trying to give you some teasers to get you to listen to it, he will say that if you study different studies on the tribulation, some people put this war at the end of the tribulation. Some people will put it anytime before it starts. The tribulation is not really, Dick and I were talking about this on the way up here. The tribulation, Armageddon, is not really a war. They are leaving, they're surrounded. They look up to Jesus. He comes back, boom, it's over with. He said, you're gone. And everybody, all the nations that have surrounded Israel, they're gone immediately. There's no war. I don't know why they call it the Battle of Armageddon. It's just gone. Now, what they say is that this battle here will take 7 years to burn all the equipment. And that's the reason some people put it at the beginning of the millennium. Well, they're not going to spend 7 years getting rid of old military equipment in the millennium. That's not going to happen. So anyway, it's a little complicated, but he's the first one that really helped me understand the difference between what's going on with this battle and the end of the Armageddon. Now, that's the reason I choose not to do that study, because it may get too complicated. Not to say that it's too complicated for you to understand. It's just that I don't want to take the time to do it, because it takes too much time to read and back it up and listen to it again and listen to it again and study it again and study it again. It's better to have a scholar do it on tape, that you can listen to it over and over again. And if you want a second opinion, you can go to another person. John MacArthur will have a different opinion of this. John Bassanio, who passed away, has got a different opinion of it. And there's different opinions. Now, he does give a little bit of two different opinions of it. But when Judy asked me, what do I think about going on right now in Israel, I said, well, that's not something that I want to do, because there are other people that can do it better. And it's best to be able to take more time, because it will take 3 sessions of at least an hour and a half each to go over all of this material. Now, I do like to do some prophetic studies. For example, Daniel, and Daniel predicted 488 days when Jesus was going to walk in on the donkey. Now, that's easy to understand. You follow that, and it's immediate, and it's already happened. And so those types of prophecies prove what Jesus is going to do. Psalm 22 gives a detailed explanation of the crucifixion. Now, that we can go over, and you can use that in evangelism. In Psalms 22, very, very detailed explanation. In fact, the matter, more detail than what's actually happened in the crucifixion in the New Testament. Psalm 22 is very, very detailed on it. The other thing is, Merle mentioned something to me. He said he listened to it. He said it was like listening to a sermon. I said, you missed, I said, you weren't here. And he said, well, it was kind of like listening to a lecture in college. Well, I hope I don't do that. I hope it don't sound that way. But I do like detail and to examine things. And sometimes when I'm listening to a sermon, even when I listen to him, I'll put the speed on 1.5 speed, because he speaks too slow for me. And sometimes I think I speak too fast. But I will go speed it 1.5 times and get the 40-minute message. I'll be over with it in 25 minutes. I just like to listen fast, and I can always back up and go back over it again. So that's one thing I was going to do. 2 things I was going to do this morning. And 5 minutes left. I was going to deal with something else that I have been thinking about and studying over. I've been here since about February when I came. Was it about then or later?
I'm not sure.
So I've been here about 8-9 months, something like that. So I've been thinking and praying about something that I'd like to do that I have not done. And that is, I'd like to visit people. in their homes. And so we've had some setbacks with going and doing evangelistic visitation lately, partly with me, some of it's weather. Rain on the Saturdays that we were planning on going out to visit a person who lives next door to Larry. He's been trying to set up some visits, and the people have not been available, but that's what I want to do, and I want to talk to people. Now, there's a lot of single ladies here. I can't go to your homes. We had a rule at Brentwood that we can't do that. I couldn't even drive down the road with another lady staff member in the car.
Unless you had a witness with you.
Yeah, unless I had somebody with me. And I couldn't talk with anybody. And I said, it's a good rule. So, what I would like to think about doing, now, couples, I can go to your house, but otherwise, I couldn't. So if you're open to it, I need to get to know people better. And when I did this in Brentwood, people that joined, they would come in and I would just listen. Sometimes I think I got more the gift of listening than the gift of talking, but I would just listen. And sometimes it would go on for a minimum of an hour and a half. One lady, I said, now if you got any questions, just go ahead. And I think we were there for 3 hours. She just kept asking questions. I said, I've got all afternoon. And so, but I would love to have a time, maybe we could set up a time down here at the church sometime, on maybe a Wednesday or another day, and I could just come down and we could find a room somewhere and just get to know you. And that would help me. And just primarily listen. The one thing that I would like to do is work on, I mentioned this last week, I think it was last week, talk about the testimony. When you pray, and Lord, help me know how to talk, how to say something. Your testimony is the most important tool that we've got, in terms of being able to share the gospel. How do we do that? And I did that with hundreds, even thousands of people in Brazil. I'd just listen to their testimony. They would tell it to me. And then I would say, we would just talk about it. We just talk it through. The other thing is, if you would like to learn how to tell a story, I did that a lot of times, even over at Mill Creek. People would come in, and one of the guys, I think I told you this, he's a super storyteller. And he would read the story several times, and we'd come in and meet, we'd talk. And I said, okay, let's get it down to a minute and a half. And he would talk about, this was one of the stories that we did. And I said, okay, tell me the story. And I said, we don't go into details, but just tell me the story real quick. And he said, well, there was 5,000 people came up there, and Jesus said, let's give them something to eat. What do you got? And the first thing he said, this the guy, he said, well, there's a boy here who's got 5 McDonald's and 3 French fries. And I said, well, that's contextualized, but let's don't do it quite like that. And so he told that story, and he's been telling that story for 10 years now. Everywhere he goes, he tells that story. Now, here's the rule on storytelling. If you're going to tell it good, you're going to have to tell it bad the first time. Everything you've ever done, first cake you baked, probably a little bit of it went in the garbage can. First meal you cooked, it took a while. So whatever you do, it's not going to be good the first time. So once you get over that, things get a lot easier. But you've got to tell it. You've got to tell the story. You've got to talk to somebody. Another minor thing that happened to me this week as I was listening, this had nothing to do with the Bible, but it had something to do with rejection. I think this is the biggest fear we have in talking about Christ, is rejection. Now, what this was about, what I studied, is that men, young boys particularly, have trouble asking a girl out on a date because they're afraid of rejection. So there's a group of people that help men overcome rejection. Now, how they do that is they have to go out and ask 50 women to go out on a date with them. And
dress sloppy. If they pick you up, you're in trouble.
he said, now, most people will have had to ask them for their phone number. Go out and ask them. And he said that obviously a very small percentage will go out with them, a very, very small percentage will give them their phone numbers. But what it does, it gives them the confidence to go out and do it because they're not afraid of rejection anymore. And they will go out and they will do that. To ask a single lady for their phone number. Now, what I'd like for us to do is to get into a habit of asking people, just like Don did, what is your favorite story? Now, that wasn't hard, was it? Worked pretty easy. Now, there'll be a handful of people, well, the majority of them that I've experienced, they'll say, I don't have one. But that's not really a rejection. They just don't have one on, people are just not walking around thinking about a Bible story. If they're working on your house or carpenter or anybody that you run into, grocery store, they're just not running around thinking about a Bible story. But, you ask them, what is your favorite Bible story? Or what is the Bible story that you know? Just tell me one you know. And then that gives you and me the ability to overcome that fear of asking somebody to do that. So that's the next thing. One of these days we will talk about how to overcome the fear of rejection, the fear of talking to somebody. Now, my son has worked with his son, and he will walk up to a cashier. And this is when he was 5, 6 years old. He'd walk up to a cashier. He said, hello, my name is Noah Fairchild. What's your name? And they say, oh, wow, okay. And I like to do this, and what do you like to do? And then just start up a conversation with the person, with them 5, 6 years old. Because we've told them that you need to learn how to talk to people. You can't just talk to people you know. You've got to meet new people. So he would walk up and tell them, hello, my name is Noah Fairchild. What's your name? And they'll start talking, carry on the conversation. Because he wants his son to learn how to talk to people. Well, let me know what you found out. One other minor thing, and I asked Jonathan about this. I said, when I said that verse in this passage where Jesus said they were so tired they didn't have time to eat, and I told my pastor friend that helped me come to surrender to ministry, he would always say, come ye apart, lest you come ye apart. Now, there was a couple of people on the left-hand side. I said, do you understand what that was? And they said, no, I didn't quite understand that. And Jonathan said it took him a second to get it. Do you follow what I'm saying? Come ye apart, lest you come ye apart. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. That if you don't take time to rest, you'll have a nervous breakdown. You've got to take time to rest. And Jesus knew that there's got to be time to rest. Come ye, and he just had a funny way of saying it. Come ye apart, lest ye come ye apart. So he told his disciples, let's come apart and rest a while, because you've got to recharge your energies. You've got to recharge your batteries. Okay, any question? What time is it? Everybody cool? Okay. So it's more or less for me today to regroup. And this coming week, Sunday, I've already given Jonathan the paper. I'm going to go over one more time the 7 signs, but this all at once. I'm going to hand out a piece of paper with all 7 signs and the thing that they learned. So hopefully you'll be able to get a story out of each one of them, whatever story you like. Everybody will get a story and be able to tell it to somebody. You can say, let me tell you about how a rich man got his son healed. Or let me tell you how Lazarus came back from the dead. And so you'll have your 1.5 minute story ready to go. Okay? I know I'm, what they call it in Brazil, sticking you with a stick.
Sounds like you're poking the bear.
Yeah. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the day. Thank you for our time together. And give us the wisdom to have the skills to be able to share your great salvation with others that are around us. For we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.